Hi, my name is Jacob Brown, and I'm a couples therapist in San Francisco. I want to welcome you to Sex, Love, and Couples Therapy. We all want to feel loved. That's a universal desire. But sometimes, instead of feeling loving, our relationships feel confusing, frustrating, and a little crazy-making. The purpose of this podcast is to help you clear up some of that confusion so that you and your partner can find ways to make your relationship feel closer, more connected, and more loving. So stay tuned. We've got a lot of great stuff to talk about. And now let's go talk about my 3 favorite topics: sex, love, and couples therapy. Well, welcome everybody to Sex, Love, and Couples Therapy. And I couldn't be happier than to tell you about our guest today, Dr. Ari Tuckman. Ari has a unique combination of both an interest in ADHD and is a certified sex therapist. He's an international presenter, author of 4 books on ADHD, including his most recent one, ADHD After Dark, Better Sex Life, Better Relationship. He has appeared on CNN and National Public Radio and have been quoted in the New York Times, Boston Globe, Washington Post, and Men's Health. And today, amazingly, Dr. Tuckman is here with us on Sex, Love, and Couples Therapy. Ari, welcome. Thanks so much for coming.
It is my pleasure. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff, so I'll take most offers.
So I was wondering, just to get started, becoming a certified sex therapist is no easy feat. That requires a lot of effort, a lot of study, a lot of training, a lot of work and time and money. And I'm wondering, but you also have this very successful and you're very well known around ADHD. And I'm wondering kind of where those two things came from and how they kind of come together.
Yeah, it is a good question. So, I mean, I've been doing stuff with ADHD, especially ADHD in adults, which is definitely used to be a seriously underserved population, and now is just kind of mostly still an underserved. It's less of an underserved, so we're not killing it yet. But, so like a lot of what I did for a lot of years was really sort of focusing on adults with ADHD being more effective in day-to-day life. So just managing, all the responsibilities of adulthood, or in the case of teens and kids, right? So like, how do you keep track of things? How do you set priorities? How do you get stuff done and stay organized? And, just all that stuff. It's all important. It's all good stuff. But kind of more and more over, those 20 years, I kind of got to a point where it's like, you know what? This is not like, right? This is not just about the individuals. We're not, we don't live on an island by ourselves. We live with other people, and we're social creatures. We depend on other people. We want other people in our lives, and we want that to go well. So I became more and more interested in this sort of relationship and the couples therapy piece, as well as, family relationships between, kids, teens, and parents. But obviously a big part of relationships is sexuality. I mean, it's not the whole thing, hopefully, but like that's an important part. And I kind of felt that by not addressing that piece in a very explicit and direct kind of a way, I don't know, like that I was sort of missing a pretty good lever, so to speak, to pull to help my individual and couples therapy clients kind of do better, right? Be happier, enjoy each other more. So that when the inevitable frustrating annoyances of like, I don't know, you left the milk out and now it's bad, right? Like when that stuff comes up, they have a bit of, gas in the tank, a bit of resilience to bounce over the setback and keep going and feeling good about each other.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've seen is that while that sexual part of the relationship is so critical, it's the last thing that couples are often willing or interested in talking about, even in couples therapy.
Yeah.
I find that I'm always the one who has to bring that up. They almost never bring up sex.
Yeah.
Unless it's kind of the core issue that's driving them to therapy, but they don't want to bring that up. And most interestingly, is that many couples therapists shy away from bringing up sex, which I think is just crazy.
Yeah, I know that was actually going to be the response I had is like, in defense of the couples, a lot of couples therapists don't bring it up either, which is sort of crazy. It's like, I don't know, it's like being a child therapist and not bringing up school, right? Or something like, I don't know, like, so yeah, I mean, the problem is a lot of couples therapists, as insane as this is to say, have like minimal training in sexuality beyond the sort of general obvious, right? But yeah, I mean, I think it is important, and it can feel really vulnerable and intimate and hard to discuss. And yet, like anything, if you can't be specific and direct about it, if you can't ask for what you want, if you can't hear what your partner wants without freaking out about it, it probably doesn't go as well.
Right. I think that's so true. And I think, as with all things, that same vulnerability and discomfort is extended to the therapist, and he or she is uncomfortable kind of bringing these things up and talking about them. And if they're uncomfortable, how can they expect their clients, the patients, to kind of have this comfortable discussion about this and to normalize this behavior? Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And
but it even even beyond that, it potentially sends the message that, like if you're the couple there and your therapist seems a bit weird and awkward about sexuality, it kind of reinforces the idea of, wow, sex really is hard to talk about. Look, even this professional seems a bit squeamish about it,
So true. Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. So just talking about sex is hard, but then talking about masturbation, it just takes it up another two notches.
It does.
People will be willing to talk about sex if they have to, but God, they don't want to talk about masturbation. Yeah. And I have to tell you, therapists, not sex therapists, but regular therapists really don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
It just is, there's too much going on there. In my experience with couples, that question of masturbation is really there, but it's not something that people are talking about, because often one partner or the other is masturbating and the other partner is unhappy about it, or has questions about it, or has feelings about it, but they're unable to talk about it. And so everybody's a little uncomfortable. And at the core of part of that, and I think we were talking before we got started, is this question is, does my sexuality belong to my partner? Am I only a sexual person within the marriage when we're together, or do I have a sexual identity, separate of that, and sexual experience that's separate of that? And I'm not talking about, going out and sleeping with other people, but just, do I as a person have a sexual identity separate from that when I'm with my spouse or partner?
Yeah.
It's a big question.
And it is. And, so I think this is what makes talking about masturbation so difficult, but also I think so incredibly interesting, because it sort of taps into these much bigger, more universal sort of dynamics and questions about relationships, about how, a relationship is two individuals and it's also a couple, right? So it's three things, and it can't be one, and it can't be too much of one, and it can't be too much of the other, So like, how does that get balanced out? And in some ways, I mean, like, there are certain topics in life that really become these kind of places where you got to figure it out. So, things like, I don't know, there are some bands I really like that my wife finds either at best annoying or at worst just terrible and offensive, right? But that's fine, because I just don't put it on the speaker and I listen on my headphones or I listen at the gym, and it's like not a problem. But then there's other things in life that are not quite as easy. So things like, how many kids are we going to have, right? I can't decide to have 3 kids and my wife decides to have 1. I mean, not if we want to stay together. In terms of money that we spend or don't spend, right? $1 spent is gone, right? You can't spend some of it, spend it but not spend it. And I think that sexuality and masturbation, it fits into that as well, in the sense of like, are we doing it? Are we not doing it? And couples have to actually come to a decision. They need to talk about it. They need to understand each other, understand themselves, and then come to a decision. And I think that when they don't, then you get mostly what you get is kind of secret masturbation. I was going to say sometimes also what you get is like, okay, fine, sort of a resentful compliance of I won't do it, but boy, am I not happy about it.
Yes.
And the problem with secret whatever is it's often found out, right? Most of us are not being recruited by the CIA for our, stealth skills. And if you're with someone often enough, it's only a matter of time before, somehow something gets discovered. And, now we've got a problem, and probably with terrible timing of when it and how it came out. But now we have two problems. The one is you were doing this thing. The other is you were hiding it from me, so.
Right. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we actually have three problems.
Yeah.
Because the other is that I have a lot of feelings about the fact that I had to hide this.
Yes. Yes.
So I may be resentful or unhappy or whatever, shameful because I'm maybe in the rules of that marriage, I'm lying to you I've got a lot of feelings that I'm carrying around. Everybody's got feelings about this, but nobody's talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. And like everything that isn't talked about, like it makes more problems.
Yeah.
So, but this is where it's hard. I mean, the obvious advice is you should talk about it, but like the obvious advice also is you should wake up at 6 a.m, go running, and then you should floss, and then you should eat kale, right? So like the saying is the easy part, but it's hard. It is hard.
It's hard
to have those conversations, especially about things like sexuality that can feel so vulnerable and that are so open to judgment. Like, is there something that's interesting to me that is going to freak you out, and then you're going to get judgy and critical about it? Does it change how you see me? Or does your reaction change how I see you, right? But like, that is life. That is relationships. Intimacy is not, only telling me the parts of you I like. Intimacy is also, man, there's some weird stuff about you. I totally don't get it, but that's okay, because there's all the rest of you that I really do love and appreciate. And, I can tolerate the other stuff, if we handle it well.
Yeah, I think that's really true. The interesting thing about masturbation is that even individually, maybe before I'm in a relationship or when I'm a kid or when I'm growing up, even if I'm not in a relationship, there's all this stigma and shame around this. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are as to kind of what the origin is to the shame that we carry around us kind of culturally around masturbating. Why is it that it's okay to go out and sleep with men or women, but not to kind of have to masturbate on your own?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a true thing that, it kind of comes down to this idea that sexuality is somehow dangerous. Like there's risk, there's, problems come from, too much sexuality or something. And I mean, it can, like it totally can. People make terrible, terrible decisions about sexuality. But like, let's be honest, people make terrible decisions about everything, right? So sex is not really unique at all. Like it's not. But it's this kind of basic distrust of sexuality. And I think it comes out of this idea that, la, 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 I'm not thinking about it. It doesn't exist, right? Like this idea that you can just sort of like make it go away. And if you don't pay attention to it, then somehow it just sort of it ceases to exist, which is slightly true, maybe, but mostly not. It's sort of, unfortunately, it creates this very self-fulfilling prophecy that if you can't talk about sexuality, if you can't think about it in a clear and complete way, I think it is more likely to cause problems.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is like a basic thing. Folks who grow up in areas where they have marginal sex ed or, just frankly, ineffective and inaccurate sex ed have higher rates of STDs and higher rates of unplanned pregnancies. So, like even just that one basic, fact, I think tells a lot. So, the thing about it is sexuality, whether alone or with someone else, right, is neither good nor bad. It's a question of what do you do with it? Are you making reasonable choices? Are you making responsible, respectful choices about what you do? And I think that, I think that's where it gets so complicated, is that there's a stigma about even talking or thinking about it. So then people don't have the language or the comfort to really kind of figure this out.
Right. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And also, as you were talking about earlier, in talking about sexuality in general or in masturbation, there's this deep fear that who I am or what I want to be will not be acceptable to my partner.
Mm-hmm.
And if I show my hand, that it's going to pull us apart rather than help bring us together. And so the safest thing is to just keep part of who I am under the covers, kind of hidden. Yeah. But of course, the result of that is that I don't get as close as I want to be, because I crave this closeness. I want to be close with my partner, to be open and connected and attached and loving. But I'm afraid that if I really tell him or her who I am in this dimension, that, like you said, I'll be judged, won't be accepted, and I'll be, hurt and disappointed that it turns out, I can't have this thing I want to have,
Yeah.
And you're not the person, are you the person I should be with if you can't really accept the person that I really am?
Yeah.
And it's so difficult.
It is. But, the thing is, you're putting your finger on, this is the dilemma of intimacy.
Yeah.
We want it, and yet we're scared of it because there's a risk. There's a great comfort in having it, that you have this thing that you feel kind of uncertain or even shameful about, and you put it out there and your partner is really supportive and wonderful about it. We all hope for that. But also the reality is, if you're, once you get past the honeymoon phase, your partner's not going to be okay with everything, and some stuff that you bring up might tweak something in them for their own reasons. So, so real intimacy, once you've been around a while, doesn't involve, kind of validating everything. That's a false premise. Like, that won't happen. But that's okay. That real intimacy comes from the ability to be clear about who you are and to be able to self-validate, to say, like, I feel okay about this, even if my partner doesn't. So again, back to the kind of dumb example of some of the bands I listen to, like, I feel totally fine. Like, I understand all the complexities and the nuances and why she has her concerns, but I feel totally fine about the bands I listen to. But, this also then becomes, there's kind of a distinction here between what do we feel and what do we do. So if I'm cranking up music that she hates, right, that's not really respectful. I think by the same token, if she says, I forbid you from listening to them, even by yourself, I think that's also not respectful, right? And the problem is, mandates tend to result in, at best, resentful compliance, and at worst, secret cheating of whatever sort. So, so this is where it gets kind of complicated. And I think that, if you're masturbating unplugged, so to speak, right, where it's just you and your fantasies, who's to know, right? Like, no one can prove anything of what's going on in your head. Now, this then kind of gets into the porn topic, and I can't believe we've almost hit 20 minutes without bringing up porn and the topic of masturbation. Right. But good, kudos to us, right? Because masturbation and porn are not the same thing. Like, those need to be two separate conversations. Right. But, the thing about it is if your partner finds your browser history, all of a sudden something is out on the table, right? Now, what your partner thinks is on the table might not be the same thing as what, you're sort of focusing on, but like there it is right there in a way that's very hard to deny.
But I think that I totally agree that they are not at all the same things, but they often come up together in discussion between partners. And, this desire of one partner to control the masturbation of the other partner is really an interesting phenomena within the relationship. And to me, and I'm wondering what you think, is that it's driven by the sense that I'm not enough.
Yeah.
That if you have to do that, that really means that I'm not enough for you. And that is such an uncomfortable feeling to have of not being enough, that the way I deal with it is to forbid. I'm going to manage it. I'm going to mandate. And I'm going to make, which is what I really hate and I see happen, I'm going to make masturbation a form of cheating, of infidelity.
Yeah.
If you have to look at naked guys or naked girls, then that's cheating. That's really an extension of this feeling of I'm not enough, but it takes, it's a hard discussion working with couples to help them look at that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that this is I think it's a great example that, again, goes way beyond just this topic, but is really sort of present in many, many topics with couples. But, so the question then is, so here is a thing that is happening, right? In this case, masturbation. But what does it mean? So
right.
Often, like you said, often the kind of first go-to is this means I'm not enough or our shared sexual experience isn't enough. That's an assumption. Now, if your partner says, honey, the reason why I masturbate is because you are not enough for me, or you're not hot enough, or you're not good enough, or something, right? If they actually say that as a reason, then okay, deal with that as a reason. But my guess is probably not, right?
Yeah.
Almost never when I have clients who talk about masturbating, almost never, like ever, I don't know, has it happened once? I don't know, where they're like, yeah, the reason why I masturbate is because my partner is not really that good in bed, right? That's not the thing that happens. So before we go kind of running to conclusions, let's actually find out, like stop, get your head back on, find out actually what is going on with your partner. Why do they do it? How is it different from shared experiences? What does it all mean? Which is just good relationship advice of every kind, So, it's kind of like the idea of like understand the situation before you figure out what to do about it. Because if you don't understand the situation, you're going to apply the wrong solutions, so to speak.
Yeah. So I'm an EFT therapist, and an EFT, what we talk about is TEMP, TEMP, which is that there's a trigger, let's say in this case, masturbation, and I have an emotional response to that. But then there's also this big part where I make meaning of it, I have a story that I tell about what this means.
Sure.
And then I have this reaction or this protective reaction. But I think what you're saying, and I think is very true, is we have to get down to that story of understanding what do we see as the meaning of this for both of us, okay, for both partners, so that we can really get down to what is actually happening as opposed to kind of this story I make up on my own. Well, if he's doing that, that means I'm not enough, or we're not enough, or he doesn't love me, or I'm not desirable. But I agree, it's almost never about the sex. It's just the same way there's this kind of belief, this myth that people cheat, are unfaithful because the sex at home isn't good enough or frequent enough. And well, maybe 5% of the time or 3% of the time that might be the core issue.
Right.
But no, That's not what's going on 95% of the time. It's not about that. And the same thing here.
Yeah. Well, and so the thing of it is, if you have the wrong understanding for what's happening, you're going to wind up with the wrong, like I said, you're going to wind up with the wrong solutions.
Yeah.
So, it's really hard, really, really hard for these kind of sensitive, vulnerable subjects to actually like calm your response enough to really actually be able to hear what your partner is saying. Yeah. But, part of it also is it can be hard for the partner to reveal it, partially because of their own shame and discomfort with it, or maybe they're not 100% clear inside themselves about, what are they doing and why, and what does it mean and what doesn't it, and all that. But it also kind of becomes this thing. If the partner who got caught is concerned about their other partner's response, they're probably going to be less honest. Or as I say, you can't punish honesty and expect the truth. So if the partner who catches someone masturbating either blows up and gets angry or falls apart into tears and, is kind of beating themselves up, both of those, nobody wants that, so that is likely to shut the partner down, perhaps lead to sort of false promises. I'll never do it again, which they probably mean at the moment. Sometimes they're lying and they're like, no, I don't mean it. I freaking know I'm going to do this again. I just don't want to deal with you right now. But probably, if you're not a sociopath, right? You mean it when you say it.
Right.
But, it's like if you told your wife, okay, that from now on, every day I'm waking up at 6 a.m. and going for a run, right? Like, no, you're not, right? Let's all be honest. You shouldn't say it and she shouldn't believe it. So, but, the other side of this is, especially in couples that have kind of a bigger desire discrepancy, as it's called. In other words, one person would like sex 4 times a week, the other is more than happy with once. It creates this terrible no-win situation that either the higher desire partner either feels deprived all the time, which is a setup for trouble, or worse, maybe, the lower desire partner feels like they're having sex they don't want. And the best way to kill your sex life is have sex you don't want, and then the higher desire partner knows the lower desire partner is only showing up because they have to, right? It's like the going to the DMV to get your license renewed, right? Like, oh, that's as excited as you are about this. Great. So, I think to be able to have an honest discussion, and, I think that this is often a thing that doesn't happen, right? Like this thing of you cheated on me. Well, cheating implies that there was a mutual understanding and agreement. And maybe there was, but you know what? Often there isn't, right? There isn't. There hasn't been a discussion. So did they cheat? I don't know. It feels like it, but your partner may not feel the same way. So let's be clear on what are we doing? How does this all fit together? Where do your desires and my desires, where do they intersect and where do they diverge? And really, really be honest and don't make agreements you can't keep.
As you kind of started that discussion right now with, let's have an honest discussion. But I'm wondering, how do you as a sex therapist, as a couples therapist, help your couples learn how to have an honest discussion? I mean, how can we help people learn how to actually talk about this instead of hide from it? Yeah.
I mean, I think it's about really being able to be honest and vulnerable and to speak from your own experience and to be able to ask a lot of questions and get curious about your partner's experience. And a good way to avoid that is to talk in generalities or to make sweeping generalizations. All men, all women, all porn, all that's a great way to not talk about yourself. You know what? It doesn't matter what other couples do. It doesn't matter, unless you're a policymaker or something, right? It doesn't matter what society is doing. You are 2 people together in one relationship. It only matters what the 2 of you are doing. Talk about yourself, right? Be clear about how you feel, about what is interesting, what feels uncomfortable, definitely the reasons why. Let's get into the whys of this. Let's really, really understand the situation before we have any discussion about what we're doing about it. Mm-hmm. And, in terms of this, we can't control what our partner feels or thinks or desires, but we do have some, say on what they do, or at least we have some say on what we do, So, I'm asking you, like, this makes me feel really uncomfortable. I'm asking that you don't do this kind of a thing.
Right.
Okay. Maybe. And then for the other partner, either to say, you know what? Okay, fine. Yeah, I'll do that. Like I accept the fact that I won't be listening to some bands, on the Sonos in the kitchen in the morning. But in other ways to say, like, you know what, like, I can't, like, no, I can't, I can't, I'm not going to agree to that. Like, I will not feel good about it. I feel like I'm selling myself out, and I don't think I'm going to be able to stick to it. So, like, let's, again, no false agreements, back to the drawing board. Let's talk some more.
Yeah, no, I think that's very right. If you don't mind, Artie, I'm going to push a little bit on you.
Yeah, do it.
How do we get people to be willing, or how do we help people to be willing to start that conversation of talking about themselves? Mm-hmm. Where do you go to help them kind of begin to open up that way, and take that risk, that vulnerable risk?
So this is a cost of doing business. If you want to be in a satisfying long-term relationship, this is what it takes on this topic and many others. But if you can do it well on this topic, you will carry those skills to whatever the other topics are. So, if you want an ongoing satisfying relationship in general, if you want an ongoing satisfying sex life, these are the conversations that you need to be able to have. They're not fun all the time. And, we wish we didn't have to, but, like, this is adulthood. This is what really good relationships require. But the good news is there's a lot of benefit for it. It's like after you go for a run, you don't always want to beforehand. Hopefully you feel okay 5 minutes in, but, like, you're better off for it. Like, that is a good thing. And all the rest of your day and all the rest of your week is better for having done it. So, so I think to really kind of remind yourself of what the benefit is on the other side, even if you're just sort of taking it on faith. But, like, if as a couple you keep kind of crashing into the same rocks, which is often the case, I don't know, like, it might be that seeing a therapist together can, help you guys learn some better ways to kind of manage the process a little differently so that, those conversations go better.
Right. No, I totally agree with that. One of the ways I frame this with my couples is that one of my jobs, or one of my primary jobs really, is to help them have difficult conversations that they're having trouble doing on their own. Because as you said, they keep crashing into that same rock. And so we're having a difficult conversation together, the three of us. And my job is to help keep them present and here in that conversation, because it's so uncomfortable that it's kind of like people want to escape, or they'll either try not to have it, or they'll put up what I call chaff, something to distract you.
Sure.
So they'll throw something up that's totally unrelated, but just let's go there. It's like, let's go look over here. It's kind of like misdirection. And so we sit together, the three of us, working very slowly through a difficult conversation.
Yeah.
And everybody feels kind of uncomfortable, but like you said, really better for the process.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to highlight a word you use, slowly. Bad conversations happen quickly, move quickly. Better conversations happen much more slowly, right? In that, a couple who's been around for a while, right? Like, they move quickly through the bad conversation because we all know the script. Right. Like, oh, this is how it goes. Here, I say this, and then you say that, and then I do this, and then you do that. Right? Like, you don't have to have the conversation because you already know how it's going to go. So the trick is to really, really, really slow it down, to calm it down, to call a timeout if you need it, with, the implicit agreement that you will indeed come back. Timeout is not forever. It's just for now. And to really try to understand the situation in a better way, to really kind of keep in mind, what are my better ways of responding? Because we all have the easy bad ways. Those are pretty ingrained. And to really be able to kind of hang in there and find out what's going on with yourself, find out what's going on with your partner, and to not read in what isn't actually there. And that's a lot of where we get ourselves into trouble, is we start making assumptions that are really not actually all that true.
And I think, in terms on a functional level, like you said about taking breaks, this isn't a problem that we have to solve. It's like, okay, so last night, my wife and I are working out, so some issue around taxes. And, so we had to solve that problem. How big a check are we going to write and from what account? Okay. Mm-hmm. But when we're talking about, when couples are talking about their sex life, this is like an ongoing conversation. This is not, let's solve this problem and come to an answer. This is like, oh, I didn't know that. Let's talk about that. Let's, that curiosity and that slowness, like you talked about, is so hard to do, but so beneficial to see this as, oh, let's slow this down. What does that really mean, what you just said? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh. Especially
about sex, which is so...
Especially about sex.
It's so loaded. There's so much kind of, I don't know, just sort of like implicit knowledge about it, and by implicit, what I mean is not always right, but, all these kind of societal messages. So it's like, oh, I know what that means. Do you? No, actually, seriously, like, do you know what that means? And, there's also something there of like having your partner really sort of question some stuff might help you yourself better understand it.
Right.
What does this mean? Does it mean anything that's worth knowing? Does it not? Like, what's the deal here? To really kind of understand it. And, nobody's going to challenge you to understand yourself and what you do more than your partner is.
Yes, yes. And my experience is also that people, besides wanting to solve it, they want to bring it down to, well, what do we do? So you want me to do this, or you want me, or I want this behavior in bed. And 9 times out of 10, that's not really what's going on. What I really want to do is I want to talk to you about how it feels to have sex with you, how I feel about our sex life, how it feels like for us to be together, how I feel about my own sexuality and the ways in which I'm kind of happy or not happy. It's not about we do move number 12 more often. That's not the deal.
Right. Well, I think it's also really important, like, I don't know, what does move number 12 mean? Why is it interesting? What is it about that versus something else that seems interesting to you, or that feels, like uncomfortable to the other person? Because again, like, that's the place we make tons of assumptions really quickly. Oh, I know what that means. Well, but do you?
Do you? Yeah.
Yeah. So in that, I don't know, like, in some ways, I think it's that willingness to explore, willingness to kind of let some things evolve that keeps life in. If you're going to have sex with the same person for like 40 years, like, a little bit of variety is probably a helpful thing. Or otherwise you get into, this is kind of one of my favorite lines, from the late, great Robin Williams, where he said, I don't know what the big deal is about same-sex marriage, because, anybody who's been married for a while knows it's all the same sex anyway. Right?
That's true.
In some way, like, there's the part of it that's kind of sad, and there's a part of it that's actually kind of cool, right? The part that's sad is, if you're not able to have these discussions, it is the same sex. And let's be honest, it's not that much more interesting. It becomes less interesting over time if you're having exactly the same sex every single time. The part that's kind of cool is it may be the same sex in a sort of, I don't know, in the sense of what the camera might capture, if you know what I mean, in terms of the acts that are performed or something. But kind of emotionally, or interpersonally, it can be a different experience, even if physically it's a lot of the same kinds of things. It's sort of like, how do you show up in that sexual experience? What do you bring to it? And how do you and your partner interact? Because you can absolutely have sex with another person and have like very little going on between. It's like, parallel play. It's like two people in the same room, but they're not really connected and open and intimate.
No, that's so true. That's a great point. Well, Ari, I want to be respectful of your time and start wrapping up but I have to tell you, this has been the fastest 40 minutes. This has been such an interesting discussion. The time just flew by. But I want to take a second to make sure to mention you actually have 4 books around ADHD. I mean, one's a clinical book. Mm-hmm. But I'm just going to mention the titles. The most recent one is ADHD After Dark, Better Sex, Life, and Better Relationships. Then this other one is Understanding Your Brain, Get More Done, the ADHD Executive Function Workbook. And lastly, More Attention, Less Deficit, Success Strategies for Adults with ADHD. And I just want to suggest to listeners that if you have ADHD or you have a partner or a kid or a friend and you see them struggling, that these books are extraordinary resources to helping people live more successful, more comfortable lives while accepting and actually through accepting and embracing and understanding how their brain works. It's not like their brain is bad. It's like, I've got to understand how my brain works. And if I understand that, then I can make all kinds of wonderful decisions and strategies for managing. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a firm believer in education, and maybe because I'm a little bit impatient, by which I mean I'm more than a little bit impatient. Do not reinvent the wheel, right? Smart people have come before you. People have figured out really good ideas. Don't figure it out the hard way. And, the whole purpose of a diagnosis or a label of any kind is it helps us understand the situation, which narrows us down to the things that are going to be most likely to be helpful. And, my books are full of things that I hope to be helpful. There's lots of other good stuff out there. The National ADHD Organization, CHADD.org, CHADD.org. There's lots of good information. Do not struggle figuring it out yourself. So, for the person with ADHD, for the partner also equally, or if you got a kid, by the way, if you have a kid with ADHD, good chance one of the parents has ADHD. So, a lot of adults get diagnosed through their kids.
That's interesting.
But yeah, I mean, take this information, use it well so that you're both happier. And by the way, if you're the non-ADHD partner, you're not listening to that blog or podcast or reading the blog or listening to the podcast or webinar or book as a favor to your partner. You're doing it as a favor to yourself. You will both be happier. So I appreciate you bringing this up because I'm all about knowledge and empowerment.
And I think that point you just made was so important. You're not doing it as a favor to them. You're doing it as a favor to yourself. This is how you express and show both love and connection, but also how you are more successful and happier in that relationship that you have with that person.
Yeah, exactly.
And how you support them. Well, Ari Tuckman, thank you so much. This has been just great. I really appreciate the time and the discussion. It's been wonderful. I wish you all the best. You take care. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye. Well, that's our episode for today. I hope you found it interesting and useful. But most of all, I'd like to thank you for listening. If you have a minute, please hit the subscribe button and give us a rating. And I hope to see you again soon on another episode of Sex, Love, and Couples Therapy.